Welcome, one and all, to today, the only one, a good one. Let's make it a great one. I am your host, Cassius Stallings. Blessed and honored to be here. So glad that you've tuned into Aspire. Aspire is a web-based webinar designed to inform and empower us to live our best lives physically, mentally, emotionally, financially, and socially. I am honored to be presenting today with these fine gentlemen on this call. But before we get into the conversation and introduce our panelists, I want to take a moment to respect the pause. And in respecting the pause, I want us to do two things. I want us to take a moment of silence, for our community. Several things are occurring in the world. There's always moving parts happening. And so just wanting to take a moment to just, stop, a moment of pause. And then after that pause, we're going to do a prayer. Now, if a prayer is something that you're not accustomed to doing, please feel free to mute us at that time and then join us again after. So right now, let's just take this moment of silence. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you, Lord. We thank you for this time. We thank you for this moment. We ask that you open up our hearts and our minds and our ears to what it is that we're about to receive. Bless us, God, as we are here in this time and as we go about our days. And it's in Jesus' name that we pray these things. Thank you, God. Amen. Amen. Well, again, my name is Cassius Stallings, and it is my honor to be here today. I want to take this moment to allow our guests to introduce themselves and the organizations that they serve, because today's conversation is about community. It's about community connection, and in the code, what does that look like? And so we have some phenomenal people on the call, and we want to hear from them. So let's take this time to just hear from them and introduce themselves.
Well, hey, I'm Eric Wood, and I get to serve at a place called NeighborLink here in Fort Wayne. And I grew up here, and now it's my privilege here in my 40s to get to be back here and serve people in need through neighboring and neighbors who want to serve those in need. And quite frankly, believe I have one of the best gigs in the entire world. So it's a pleasure to be here with y'all.
Go for it, Kevin.
Oh, all right. My name is Kevan Chandler, and I have a nonprofit called We Carry Kevan. It came out of a adventure that some friends and I went on several years ago in 2016, where we went to Europe, and I was carried in a backpack by my friends instead of taking my wheelchair, so that we could see what we wanted and be in the places that we wanted to be without worrying about the question that has haunted me my whole life, which is this wheelchair accessible? We decided the world was Kevan accessible if we just left the wheelchair behind and thought outside the box. And so from there, we started this nonprofit where we work with families all over the world who have mobility-related disabilities. We come alongside them, and we provide a backpack like I use for their family and friends to carry their loved one who has the disability, but also coming alongside them and helping them think outside the box, not just with accessibility, but with community as well, and realizing that there is a lot of freedom in friendship and care for one another when we invite people into our needs. So that's what we do. And I moved to Fort Wayne about 10 years ago, and got married 3 years ago. And so my wife and I are living here still, and enjoy being part of Fort Wayne. And I think this is a cool conversation to have, no pun intended, because, everything that I'm about with this nonprofit is interacting with the world around you. But, as Cassius said, it gets really cold. And especially for people with disabilities, the cold is not just uncomfortable, but actually dangerous in some ways. And so this is a conversation I'm excited to have and hear from these other guys too about how we pursue community in a time of the year that's kind of sketch. So thanks for having me.
Oh yeah.
I'm Geoff King with Love Fort Wayne, born and raised here in Fort Wayne. I'm excited to be back home, been back home for a long time now after spending just a few years away and a little bit more north Indiana, but excited to be here with these guys and to have this conversation at Love Fort Wayne. Our heart is to help unite our city, serve in that capacity and ignite transformation through God's love. And so at the root of what we love to do is convene the like-hearted to love the 5 pillars of a flourishing community, which are leaders, pastors, schools, families, and prayer. And so we look at this amazing community where so many people are doing good in our city and say, where can we tell the stories of where people are loving their community individually and collaboratively? How can we host gatherings for people to pray, serve, and be equipped? That helps us all imagine a community where we did the same. And then lastly, again, convening people each month around those 5 pillars to say, first, let's be together. And then second, what can we do together, again, to love leaders, pastors, schools, and families for our cities' transformation. I always say, we say in the city network space, city movement space, if people would love their neighbors, Eric loves this part. If people would love their neighbors, Matthew 22, if they would love the least of these, Matthew 25, if we would live every day going to make disciples just as we are. If we could do those things with the circle matrix in the middle, we would have city transformation. But what really brings it together is a big circle around those concentric circles, which is John 17, if we would do it together in love. So those 3 circles surrounded by John 17, doing that together in love, right at the middle of that is the peace and prosperity of a community. It's a picture of Isaiah 65, a city that God envisions that we could have on earth as it is in heaven in our day. So that's the work that we do. We get the cool opportunity to sit with people, meet with people, and invite people into those spaces, again, to imagine what we could do together with God's love. So again, like Kevan said, excited about this conversation to be able to chat a little bit more about being in community, especially in these winter months.
Yes. Well, thank you all for being here again, and those wonderful introductions. It's cool just to hear again, the complexities of you all and the things that you do, how you navigate the world and help to build us, to bridge together. So it's amazing. So the way that we'll spend our time is, it'll be Q&A. I'll be asking some questions at the start of it, and then those in the audience, you guys prepare your minds to just ask some questions as well, just so we can really dive into what does this mean? How do we do this? So to start, we'll ask Eric. We'll go to Eric. Eric, what are the challenges that the community faces, in the winter months, and how do we overcome them or address them?
Yeah, thanks, man. I think number one, as the clouds get grayer and the ground gets browner, there's just a reality of emotion and depression that hits the a high percentage of our population. Excuse me. And I think too, we're stuck inside more than not. And so when you have gray clouds and brown ground and isolation, you get great devastation. We aren't meant to be isolated and individual and siloed, but we often, the farther we go into history, the more isolated, individualistic, and alone we are, while we talk about being connected. I have like 3,700 people on Facebook or whatever, but many don't know me, aren't connected with me, don't know my day-to-day stuff other than what I share. And so as weather changes, temperatures change, the view outside changes, and people increasingly believe that connection is online rather than in person. We have more people overdosing, more people dying, more people in great depression that no one knows. I often say that what we do at NeighborLink, you don't know who someone is till you get behind their front door. And And so I believe that in this season at this time, while you have the weather getting colder and darker, and you have a definition of connection through technology, while this is beautiful, this isn't the relational makeup that we've been made for. We've been made for intimate connection with one another where we give and receive and love our neighbor as ourselves. And that can't happen in silos or isolation. And so I think there are mountains that get in the way. I've watched great relationships destroyed over the dark months, cold months. I watched people that are full of joy go to sorrow overnight through the isolation, cold, and darkness. And I've watched people kind of be forgotten or missed or unrepresented during those seasons or months. And I think all three of those should be things we're looking for and looking to and pressing into. And I know with these other two fellows, this is what our joy is pressing into those places and those spaces. And NeighborLink is one answer and one option for that, but there are many, many more. And it kind of starts with looking to the left or the right or the front or the back of where I live currently. So.
Yes, thank you for that. Yeah, something huge that stuck out is just that acknowledgement of person. It's the acknowledgement. Yeah, again, you don't know a person until you're on the other side of their door, and so how do we engage more, and how do we have people on the left and right of us? That's good. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Eric.
Yeah.
Hey, Kevin. How do you personally overcome feelings of isolation during these colder months? And then with that, what advice would you give others?
Yeah. So I feel like, as I said, with the winter, it's not just uncomfortable or inconvenient, but sometimes it can be hazardous to our health and dangerous. And, I think the first thing is, just as Eric said, is look around to your left and right and front and back and be aware of who's around you and what's going on around you. And I would say in the rest of the year, so that when you get to those cold times where you're at home and it's harder to get out, who's next door, who's not far away. And for my wife and I, in the winter, we do a lot more of inviting people into our home so that I'm not having to go out and because we live in Fort Wayne and you have really cold days and then days that aren't so bad, so it's fluctuating. We take advantage of the more mild times and get out when we can, and kind of maximizing the opportunities when we're able to, so that when we have to say sorry, we can't do that, or most of the time it's me telling myself, hey, you want to go out and do this thing, but it's not a good time to do it. If we've maximized the rest of our time, then saying no or declining something doesn't take as much of a hit. It's like with raising kids, if you say yes, a lot of yeses to the right things, then when you have to say no, it's different than if you've been saying no to everything already. So I think we can apply that to us as adults as well, both looking out, but also looking at yourself. But yeah, I think a lot of it is if you aren't able to go out, if you are kind of stuck at home, if you will, to use that term, inviting people in, opening your door and saying, hey, come on over, whether it's for if you want to go big and have a dinner or a movie night, or if it's just come hang out, do your work here or come have some tea. But I think that way you're not, and not everyone's going to say yes, and some people have to be in their homes as well, but that's okay. And that goes back to what Eric was saying about looking around you and seeing who's around. I think that's a big part of it, but just not being afraid to invite people in if you're not able to go out. And then when it gets warm, then you get to go back out and you get to build those relationships back up and kind of develop a reserve for, fill yourself up so that when it is cold and hard, you got those people out there kind of waiting for you if they're not able to join you at the time.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. No, that's it. It's finding those spaces, to invite people in to kind of have that community. That's huge. And that was good of like getting those people in place, maybe in those warmer months when you are seeing people more active, developing those relationships. And then when the winter comes, it's like, hey, this is easy. Hey, come on over. Let's see you some more. Let's keep doing it. Thank you. Thank you for that. Hey, Geoff, let's go to you. What strategies have you done or you seen done to kind of create these connections in the winter?
Oh man, I think, for me personally, as I was thinking about the question, I don't know if it's even strategy. It's just I personally say I've got to fight for my commitment to do life with other people, like especially in the wood outside of the summer months. Like it's already hard because you get in June and July and people are going places and you're doing things with your family, you're traveling, you should. But again, you're out with neighbors perhaps, and so it is more accessible. But for me, it's less of even strategizing. It's more about I have to fight. I have to have this willingness within me to try to make this time or to make space for this time. And if there's a strategy that I would encourage us with, it would just be to leave margins on your page for community with other people, because it can be easy. I don't want to speak for the guys, but I probably can. We could rip and run every day, meeting people, doing things for the work that we've been called to do in our nonprofit spaces, for the sake of the cause that's been placed on our hearts and that God has placed us in. We could do it. We could run. But I have to place. If I put margins in my day to work on specific things as I have to, or to plan for specific things as I have to, I see creating margins in my day to actually be with people as equally important, and I have to fight for that. I have to create those spaces. So that's probably the strategy that I would say is fight for the margins to be in community with other people, because if you don't, I just think that especially in these months, when we get inside, we stay there, or we'll find work to do instead of community. But I think we all know, you know, community fills us up. Being with people fills us up. I come from, I'm naturally introverted. Like I can be socially extroverted because I have to. God has told me that I need to, so I just keep doing what he tells me to do. But I will turtle shell with the best of them. Like, and so I need my time to recharge by myself, away from my wife, away from my kids, in our own home. And so for me, then I have to be even more strategic in fighting for that commitment and having that willingness to go and spend time with a brother that cares for me. Or, next week, where we get the opportunity to spend a couple staycation days. And I invited our friend and his wife and their son to be with us overnight, while we do this staycation for one of those nights, just because that's something that we have to fight for in these summer months. So I could go on and on, but I think that's the biggest thing, Cassius, is the strategy would be to create the march, same way we create spaces for meetings and to go different places, create those spaces for you to do life with other people, but also have the willingness to fight for it, especially in these winter months. I'll share one more story about you, Cash. Is that, like, I used to, when you were younger, we used to meet with young guys around my dinner table in the winter months on purpose, because we're all busy and you get going, and you guys were young and emerging. And for me, it was, how can we create these rhythms where it's easier for us to meet the spring, because we can sit out on my porch and do it, or sit out in the backyard and do it around the fire. But in the winter, it was important that we created space at the table, and to try to help live a life where you guys could see we needed to create some margins and we had to fight for it.
Thank you, Geoff. I I appreciate the piece that you said about you not naturally wanting to do that. You know, you being that introvert, but still knowing that you have to be intentional. You have to be intentional with it, and bringing up that story of the time that we were connected is huge because it was tough. It was tough for me, in the early years. I'm like, man, I could be doing anything, but okay, Geoff is saying, hey, come over, let's have this moment. So it is intentionality. It's how do we navigate that with intentional to, again, just highlight all three of you guys is, to find that community space, be intentional about that, but then being intentional in that community space to acknowledge the left, the right, the front, the back. So thank you for that. All right, guys, so I'll open up the floor to these questions. So as we kind of already just stated, that the winter does lead to this isolation and these feelings of isolation. So what is the work to combat that and to create more of that sense of community? How do we continue to advise in that to get that community going?
I think if I can, there's an author by the name of Liz Bohannon, and it's pretty well known now nationally that our Surgeon General said that the latest epidemic of our day is isolation, and she said it on a really grand stage at the Global Leadership Summit back in August, and so thousands and thousands of people actually heard it. If you hear something, they're like, wait a second, now everybody's studying it, and it's true. I think a lot of mental health professionals they knew that already. Counselors knew that already statistically and just by the work that they do. And for me, it's just like, if you take a step back in connection to your question and go, okay, above the things that afflict us health wise, bodily and mentally, isolation, being by yourself is like the number one thing. I say this as a man of faith, is like in isolated places is where the enemy can kill you. Where like he by yourself is where he can war on your mind, your body, your spirit, your self-esteem, all that stuff. And so for me, it's warfare type of thing, but then also health wise, mentally, Eric hit on it, is so huge in mental health, especially in this season. So I think knowing the truth of the data, that you have an official of our country that says this is the epidemic of the day, I think that we have to making people aware of that. Like, yo, this isn't just something that you might feel. This is actually happening nationally. There's studies to show it. There's data and metrics to back it up. With that being said, don't be a part of that statistic. And I think it allows for us to step back and go, okay, where am I isolated? Am I isolated in community? Do I have good connection with friends that were longtime friends? Do I have connection with my acquaintances? It's okay. Some people aren't your closest inner circle or second circle friends. Some of them are acquaintances that you connect with, every now and then. I think looking at those three parameters of who's my inner circle, what's that second circle, who are those that acquaintance circle, am I isolated from them, or am I surrounded by people? Because if you're isolated from those folks, then you fall into that statistic that has really kind of damned us as a country in the past year and a half. Which again, Eric, I'll maybe pass it to you. You hit on in when you answered your question. We weren't designed to live isolated and outside of community. We just learned how to do it very, very well. And I mean, I saw a question from Nathan that said, I find in winter that friends are fine with staying home. And, I'm like him too. Like, I don't see the need to go out. Since they're not pushing, you don't push. How do we break that cycle together? And I think from a friendship perspective, you can maybe sit back and say, what's going to be the impact of our isolation after the winter months? And how will we feel the effects of that because we've made the decision not to push each other? So I say somebody's got to push, because the impact on the other side of it could be more, this in damning than you think. And that I've thought before. I've thought, man, I'm cool. And then I recognize that I'm lonely.
Yeah. I think, so I have three rhythms that I personally am trying to commit to. And so the first rhythm is Jesus, the second rhythm is one anothering, and the third is neighboring. And so the reality is if I'm not taking care of myself, it's not going to be beneficial always to have more and more community, whether that be in a church or smaller community or my neighbors. And so I think one goal is I want to cling as tightly as possible to the one who loves me best year round, but even more when it's dark and cold. For sustainability and fruitfulness, that matters. But two, I kind of have two different layers of one anothering. I think it's important to build rhythm around brothers or sisters, including spouses, that are reciprocal in nature. We rarely have relationships that both give and receive. We have givers or receivers. And one of my buddies calls it having both valves on. And so you need relationships. I need relationships in rhythm that are having both valves on. That are giving to me and receiving from me. And I'm giving to them and I'm receiving from them. And so that would be a few people that are that first ring of closeness that Geoff was speaking to. But then our family has a few families that we meet with regularly through the month to keep proximity, whether it's cold or hot, rainy, snowy, or otherwise. And so that's my second rhythm, kind of broken into two different groups. But the third is neighboring. I don't know how many houses I've gone to where somebody is in the shadows, isolated, unknown in their need, and they have reached out for someone to show up. And when someone has showed up, you find out there's a 69-year-old woman who's taking care of a 70-year-old man with dementia who doesn't remember the meal that was put in front of him that day. And she's isolated and alone, and she asked for somebody to come and move snow from her driveway. And when we show up and move that snow, she's like, "How much do I owe you?" "Nothing. We love you, and Jesus loves you." And she starts weeping from her door. Or another man who took 3 days to ask for snow to be removed because he was embarrassed that he could no longer do it from a heart disease. Or another woman who has stage 4 cancer, or another great grandmother who's taking care of great grandchildren on her own on a fixed income. While there is the Jesus part, taking care of my insides so that there's fruit on the outside, and then there's one another in reciprocal relationships, both in one-on-one and with spouses and friends, and then in community. The neighboring aspect allows me to give without expectation. I want you to understand, for my view of neighboring is I love you without expectation. No bait and switch. You have nothing to do for me, no cartwheels to perform, no tricks to do. And I really believe, and Geoff kind of hit that earlier for me. These are all hot buttons for me. So told Cass, yes, so slow me down today. But I really believe that the hope of our neighborhoods is found in neighboring. And if we would just see each other again, most of us are judging the unkept yard, the busted, paint, the windows that are cracked, the weeds that are overgrown. And behind every one of those is often a hard story waiting for someone to see them. Just like you or I want to be seen. And so it's my prayer that I would practice those three rhythms and quite frankly, forget about some of the other mess, because the other mess gets in the way of these three rhythms.
Wow. Thank you both. That was powerful in the things you said, both of you, Geoff, and reiterating, this call of urgency to remove ourselves from this isolation, to find community. And then Eric and loving neighbors, that's huge. I love that piece you said of love without expectation. I think of it, I talk about loving blindly, lead with blind love. Because we don't need to see where it's headed or what it can do. But if we just love and learn to love the room, it'll have impact. So that's huge, huge. What are some of the traditions that you guys may have seen, or activities that kind of have some meaningful community collaborations in them?
Yeah, was thinking about, I love that Geoff brought up intentionality, and then Eric was talking about these rhythms. And so something I was thinking about also is the other, I feel like when you say rhythms, it can be like Eric's talking about, the rhythms of how you focus, but then there can also be kind of pragmatic rhythms as well of on this day I'm going to go here, on this day I'm going to see this person. Um, and so with that, I was thinking about, having rhythms established, like well, a big one, because of what scripture says about not forsaking gathering together, having, even in the winter months, having a church that you're part of, because then even if the rest of the week you feel like you need to stay home, you've got this place that you go, you step out of your front door and you go and commune with others that hopefully are encouraging to you, and you're encouraging them, and they're putting forth the effort to get out of their house as well. So there's a shared commitment there. And then, I mentioned earlier about inviting people into your home. I mean, for me, I need help getting up every morning, and so I've got this rhythm of guys that come in the morning to help get me up, and so Eric comes on Tuesdays. But the cool thing about that kind of rhythm is sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes you do miss a beat, and that's okay, because if it's a rhythm, then you can pick it back up. And so, Eric and I were talking this week because, it didn't work out for him and I to get together. What's today? Wednesday. Yesterday, it didn't work out this week, and so we said, well, that's all right. We'll just pick it up, next time that we can. And whereas if we didn't have a rhythm, we might be kind of scrambling to say, well, when can we see each other? How do we fit this into our norm? And as Geoff was saying, like it's really easy to say, no, I'm just going to pull the covers over my head. I'm just going to stay in my home. And I think with rhythm comes this idea of some sacrifice as well, to say, well, no, this is my rhythm. I need to step out and do this thing. And today, we're talking about the winter, so it's like, well, today is cold, and it's uncomfortable, but it's not dangerous. It's okay. I can go out and see these people. I can put forth this effort. I can be uncomfortable and make the sacrifice for the sake of community, for the sake of others, and care for them and connect with them face to face outside of my home. And so that when there is a day when I say I can't go out, they can either come to me, or again, with rhythm, we say, well, I can't do it today, but we can jump on it tomorrow. We can jump on it the next day. So yeah, I think having that, not saying you have to set your whole life in, on a calendar, like Geoff was saying, you got to have space to see what the Lord is going to do, right? But having a few things, kind of milestones set throughout your week that I'm going to connect with people on this day at this time.
Yeah, that's cool. I really like that rhythm and the set of a date, because once I think that you do have, that time and gathering in place, whether it be weekly or monthly, whatever the strategy is, that once that time doesn't happen or life occurs and it's like, hey, this day doesn't work out, that at least you can come back to that day every time and say, hey, let's do something else. That's amazing. Yeah, that rhythm is so crucial. Okay, so I got one more question for you guys, and I know Eric already said like that we need to be in person. You know, those where gatherings happen best, but we're online right now, and sometimes connection can happen online. And so with that, what are, how has technology helped to facilitate? Have you guys seen technology be beneficial for connection?
I mean, I'll answer because it makes me laugh. Like, um, so my college housemates, I joke at work. I think Lori's on here. I'm like, oh, my friends don't work because they text. They are working, but like we text during the day, man. Like we're all over the place. Like, and I think without like we group FaceTime sometimes, and we text. I mean, we can have we got guys in Colorado and Michigan and a couple in Fort Wayne, but our schedules, one of the guys works like a 5 a.m. to like 1. So he sleeps at like 7:30. So people have different lives, different states. And I think, those guys that we're able to text about funny stuff, life stuff, kid stuff, being good husbands where things are hard with our children, you know, without text technology or being able to jump on a FaceTime where there's multitude of us on the FaceTime, like, yeah, when would we see each other? And it's interesting that we're having this conversation because like in the winter, it does pick up because we set a couple rhythms and when it's warm to get our families together, in June, and we try to get one more in the fall. So like, um, we see each other when it's warm and we drive somewhere, but without, that type of connectivity to technology, I don't know how close we would be. So I was going to say, um, if my friend that lives in Colorado that grew up here in Fort Wayne went to college with us, if he were to come home, this weekend for Christmas, like no beat missed because I've seen him. I've literally just seen him not too long ago on FaceTime. He's in the group text every day or every other day. And so those are some advantages that I think have really uh, kept us connected. But again, I would say, you have to fight for that rhythm too. I'm really close with my older sister. We're just under 2 years apart, and she lives in Austin, Texas. She's got her little girls, and I've got my family, and we still have to. FaceTime is like that. It's a ring away, and we even say to ourselves, we've got to stay connected a little bit more. She's my sister, and so I would say, yeah, great advantages for family that you want to stay in community and connection with. Really good opportunities where, again, if you can't make it to meet a friend, but hey, you fight for that. Say, hey, if we can't meet, you want to just hop on a quick FaceTime or a Zoom uh, all the time. So I think there's really cool advantages to staying connected to the folks that you love or the folks that you mentor, you've discipled, or the folks that have walked with you along your life. There's opportunities to stay connected with folks that are national. I haven't traveled like the guys have. I know he's traveled a lot, so I can only imagine what technology has done for him in his journey with staying in community that has poured into his life. But that's how it's benefited me personally.
Go ahead, Kev.
I was just going to piggyback off of that and say, there's a really great book called The Tech Wise Family, and the subtitle of it is putting technology in its place. And from that, and from my own life experience, what I've realized is, as far as community and connection, technology like this is a great supplement, but we have to, and I think this is what Geoff was saying, is like it's great to connect with our people that way, but we don't say, well, that's the only way that we're going to stay connected to them, or well, I've got these friends really far away and we text all the time, so I don't need friends right here, and so I think it's a great tool, like he was saying, to connect. And my best friend that I grew up with is in Texas. My family's out West Coast, Canada, and not exactly running into them on the street every day, but we try intentionally to get together when we can, and and then we stay in touch through technology. And then besides that, just being present with the people that are around me. And so, yeah, I think it's a great supplement, but we can't allow that to be our full source of connection.
Yeah, interesting last 24 hours I've had. Maybe it's just for right now. A guy that I had grown out of touch with, that had really powerful moments with 15 years ago, and haven't really spent much time with for the last 10 years. Some texts here and there, some messages here and there. Maybe I'd stop in to see him here and there. Last night, he posted a GoFundMe for himself because he's in a very serious cancer battle that he never let anybody know about. Like, only the few people around him knew about. And so here's my challenge on technology. I love what Geoff said about FaceTime, texting, connecting. It's a supplement. It's not the whole that Kevan said. Here's what I think. I don't even know why I felt so compelled last night, but last night I ran up to Parkview after I saw that. I said, "Hey man, where are you at and what's going on? Can I come and sit with you?" And he just said, "Anytime you want, and here's my room number." So a GoFundMe turned into a message that turned into presence. And I would just say, like, I was beat, man. I got home at 8:30, talked to my kids for a little bit. And by about 8:45 or 9 o'clock, maybe I got home at 8 or something, but by 9 o'clock, I was sitting in a hospital room with a man taking 5 days of chemo and just listening to him. And so I would just say, may it be a doorway into greater. May it be a doorway into greater things. I didn't necessarily want to do that last night. I was tired. But there was this weird, compelling call inside of myself that said, man, I need to go sit with this buddy that I haven't seen in a decade in real, tangible ways. And it was technology that opened the door for that. And so I think maybe that's the disconnect that I feel often by technology. Not FaceTime, not texting. Texting has other stuff to talk about. But what I see is we see a bunch of hurt plastered all over technology, a lot of questions and anger. And what I felt compelled to last night was to follow up on the hurt. And that follow-up turned into sitting with a guy physically. So maybe my plea would be that we would just follow up with what we see through the lens of technology.
Brilliantly said. Thank you so much, all of you, for that input. That is wonderful, of just, again, knowing that we can use it to stay in connection and have those moments, but knowing that it's supposed to be the tool or the guiding force to be in person with one another. All right, guys, that's all I have for you all. Well, we have some questions in the chat. Let's go back and just touch on Nathan's question again just a bit. He said again that I find in the winter that friends are fine with staying home and don't see the need to go out. And since they aren't pushing for connection, I don't push. How do we break this cycle?
We can only start with ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. if they don't want to push, so you don't want to push, then it sounds like you need to push first and foremost.
Yeah, I would just second that. Yeah, I mean, it just starts individually. It really, really does.
I heard
my wife's used to me talking about her when she's not around, so I have to pass her in. So but she would be okay with me sharing. Like she often will share, like, hey, I sent that message, I sent that text, and we've resoluted on, or I made that phone call and invited that time of connection. And I've often encouraged her to say, man, you've done your part. And I think that's part of it, because on the other side of it, to his question, is we just don't know what might be happening with that friend, what their life rhythm and time is like. And so that's where the beauty of grace has to come in. But we do, like Kevan said, we own our portion of it, man. And listen, man, it is just real. I just sometimes I just like to keep it real, dude. When it's like 20 degrees out and it got dark at 4:45, like it's hard. So again, you have, I mean, it's just really, I think about my daughter, I'm at 3 high school basketball games a week, which is amazing to, be in that community, be in that space with other parents cheering on one of my kids. So again, life things happen. And the cold is hard. And one of the things that I've heard be said before with someone I was in conversation with is community costs like money. Like like now it costs a lot to be in community because it's if I don't feel comfortable with somebody coming in my home, which is okay, and I have to go to a coffee shop or we have to go to dinner, and I'm saying, yeah, you don't have to buy the coffee. So here's the invitation. You don't have to. The coffee shops don't kick you out anymore for not buying a coffee or buying a Danish. You can sit there. So I could ramble on. I just think just to what I said earlier to Nathan's question is, and again, to piggyback off Kevan, it's you can only handle yourself and create your spaces of invitation that you've been called to do, and then allow for folks to say yes or no, but then also extend the grace because you don't know what's going on personally with them as well. But again, as I say, community costs, I would say also the lack of community and the desire for being in community, that costs too. And so I think if there's some financial constraints or even space constraint of where you want to have people in your spaces, then I think you take that time and say, man, if I really want it, where are the spaces and places that I do feel comfortable going or where community can happen?
Yeah, one thing that I think I'm trying to work out is the most incredible human in all of history, I believe, is Jesus. And the way he looked for people, saw people, was different than I often do. And so his day was often made up of people that would come to him or be brought to him by some friends or cry out to him, or he'd walk past them, or he'd recline with them, sit with them, or he'd go out of his way for them. And I think I'm more interested right now in looking for those that are hungry and thirsty for those things. Also, somebody who is aware of their need of community, aware of their need for help, is meek enough to see that and raise their hand and become vulnerable. I'm looking for that, but I want to imitate Jesus in that I'm looking for who's coming to me and who's being brought to me, who I feel compelled to go out of my way for, who I see as I walk along the way of my day, and I just want to have the margin. What I say often is I have to have margin for the marginalized. I have to have margin for those throughout the day. And so, like what everybody said, I'll push in and press into that relationship. And if there's not reciprocation, that's okay. Did my part. But I'm always looking for those that are looking and waiting for that opportunity too.
That's huge. That's huge. If I heard a quote, if not me, then if not me, then who? And that's something huge that you guys kind of expanded on. You have to be willing to reach across that table, maybe make that connection, and then being authentic in that moment of doing so. Miss Sheila Curry Campbell, I'm not saying you're old. I'm going to say you're older. She said she's older and never heard of the word rhythm used so much. What are suggestions for her church bulletin on creating rhythm in their life, over the winter months, or resources or toolkit?
I mean, this is a hard one because I don't know the context of your church community. But I would start asking questions about, I would observe and ask questions to the folks in the body, and then look to see for ways to encourage them to build rhythm. and then come alongside them in that need. So I think some of the hardship is that people have waited on the leadership of the church to build rhythm or program for them. But I think it's the role of shepherds and leaders to equip people to build those rhythms in of themselves in their homes. And so, I would ask, how can you come alongside equipping them in building some of that pattern or rhythm in their life? And there's certainly some things you could do, but I would want to know what the body's made up of and what are the needs that make up of the body, so as to know how to help you. So I'd be willing to come and follow up with you at some point.
Yeah, I would just echo that verbatim. Yeah. What's the needs of the church and the church body itself? Where are those natural spaces where people are longing for connection that perhaps nobody is talking about, but with observation you can see it clearly. And so sometimes I think community rhythms show themselves through observation by watching where people have lack that they necessarily can't see it. So I think Eric hit it on the head to see the needs of your specific church body as it pertains to people doing life rhythms, having life rhythms with one another and staying connected in community.
That's huge. That's huge. That literally is meeting people where they're at. All these situations, as we talk about community and what that could look like, is going to look different for all variety of sorts of people that we interact with. So it's going to look different. Let's see. I love the idea of lifting up the need of rhythm of connection during the winter months in church bulletin. I wonder if what's the would have some messaging about that. Oh, that wasn't a question for us. Lutheran Foundation. Thank you, Colleen. Thank you, Colleen. Yes, so Colleen was just saying that there may be some resources for that if we looked into the Lutheran Foundation. Thank you. Are there any other questions, chat world out there, while we still have these guys?
Can I plug Eric real quick? I don't know if you're ready for that, for this to launch this, but I know you guys, at NeighborLink, excuse me, they've got just some really like cool foundational ways to neighbor that are foundationally rooted in God's word. And wherever you are in your faith journey, I think Jesus did community well and he did it the best, and Eric talked about that. So I love what they utilize to say, really, if you wherever you are in your relationship with the Lord, it's you walking with him or not, following his model of neighboring and meeting people at the table in different seasons of life, both the physical seasons and also relational seasons. They got a cool kind of one pager, and I can say that because we had a prayer gathering back in the spring, and we were praying for the city of Fort Wayne to love their neighbors, and we just utilized some of those prompts for the community that was there. So we've utilized it organizationally as Love Fort Wayne as an encouragement for the city to pray about and think about what neighboring looks like in one's personal context. So I just kind of wanted to pub that again. I think it's a really useful tool for folks to check out and think about their own context.
Yeah, we'd love to jump in on that with folks. I don't want to get ripping right now because we got 6 minutes, but it's really good stuff to process together and to think about moving in together. And I think, all three of you live in that one way or another in the ways that you've been made. And so that's one privilege, is to do life in this city at this time with like-minded folks that are fleshing it out in their own context with their own giftings and talents and the work that we've been made for, because we're not a bunch of robots doing the same thing the same way. And we've been called to the same thing under one King. And so it's a fresh season to see that flushed out amongst your guys' different responsibilities and seasons of life.
Thank you for that, Eric. All right, well, as you said, we are getting ready to wrap up our time, but before we end, I want you all Geoff, Kevin, Eric, to just give the community right now in this space just a one-liner to leave off with, that send off, one-liner, one thing, just to send us off.
Ooh. Always. Okay.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
No.
The
All three
first
say it at the same time. You guys just go.
maybe we'll all say the same thing. No, I was just gonna say the first thing that came to my mind was pursue community and do what you need to make it work in the winter and push through the winter, knowing that it doesn't last forever.
Mm.
I would just, give lavish grace to your neighbors, abundant kindness away, and come humbly with truth. I think we are a society that loves to tell people what we think, and they must think like us. And often we lack the love that Jesus exhibits and gives away so freely. So I often like to define love as grace and truth applied. And Jesus did that perfectly. So get close to him, see what he does. May fruit flow and people's lives get touched.
Yeah. Kevin, he did a good job. We're going to say something eerily similar to the guys is, it's two words, just love lowly. And I love the word lowly because when you come into community with your best friends, if you come lowly, that's where authenticity happens, because you come humbly before your best friends because you can share with them. When you come lowly into spaces shared with other people, where you're convening and collaborating together to see a city change, your community change, or to love your neighbor. When you come lowly, you come in a posture where you don't feel as if you hold everything in your hands. You hold it openly to walk with others. And so just love lowly. It helps you love without borders. It helps you love close in proximity. It helps you know people authentically. So come into spaces to love your community and to be together in community with a gentle and lowly heart. Because for me, Jesus said, "I am gentle and lowly at heart." That is the core of his being, and I think that's how we could present ourselves to one another as we seek to not be a people that are so isolated, especially in these winter months.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you again, Eric, Kevin, Geoff, for joining us and having this conversation. This, again, is just a catalyst to more conversation, for us to have more connection, for us to find more community. I will be sending out everyone's information if you didn't already get it. But that is all. Thank you again. Peace.